Ryan and Emily Parker were the couple everyone envied, successful, attractive, and expecting their first child. But just months before their baby was due, Ryan threw Emily out of their home without warning. Alone and heartbroken, she disappeared from his life. What no one knew was that Emily wasn't running away, she was digging. And when she returned, she brought with her a secret so powerful, it didn't just expose Ryan's darkest crimes, it destroyed everything he had built. At first glance, the lives of Ryan and Emily Parker seemed almost too perfect. They were the kind of couple that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread, smiling in matching flannel shirts at Christmas, standing beside their golden retriever in front of a perfectly manicured lawn. Their neighbors often commented on how in sync they appeared. Ryan ran a successful construction company in a growing Georgia suburb, and Emily, who had recently left her job as a high school art teacher, was expecting their first child. To everyone around them, it looked like they had it all, but appearances are deceiving. Behind the front door of their beautiful two-story home, things were starting to unravel. Ryan had changed. He wasn't the affectionate, attentive husband he used to be. He began working longer hours, always coming home later than usual, often with vague excuses and the smell of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Emily tried to ignore the signs at first. She told herself he was just stressed, that maybe he was overwhelmed by the idea of becoming a father. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. She felt it when he started avoiding her touch. She felt it when he stopped asking about the baby. The excitement they once shared, picking names, painting the nursery, imagining life as a family, faded into silence and distance. Emily tried to reach him, but every attempt was met with coldness or irritation. She began keeping a journal, writing down his behavior, small things that didn't feel right. It wasn't about building a case, not yet. It was just her way of staying sane. The final blow came on a stormy Tuesday evening in October. Emily had spent the day at a prenatal checkup. She picked up Ryan's favorite takeout on her way home, hoping to surprise him, maybe reconnect. But when she pulled into the driveway, something was off. Her key didn't work. Confused, she knocked. Ryan opened the door, expressionless, like she was a stranger. Without saying much, he pointed to a row of trash bags on the porch, her clothes, her belongings packed and dumped without care. She stood there, soaked by the rain, heart pounding, staring at the man she once loved. He told her to leave, no warning. No explanation. Just a short, heartless statement that ended everything they had built together. Emily pleaded, not understanding why. He didn't answer. He closed the door, locked it, and turned off the porch light. She walked away with no money, no home, and no plan. All she had was the child growing inside her, and a gut feeling that there was more to this than just a failing marriage. Something darker. Something hidden. As she drove away that night, tears streaming down her face, she didn't know what her next move would be. But one thing was certain, she was not going to vanish quietly. Whatever secrets Ryan was hiding, she was going to find them. And when she did, he would regret ever trying to erase her. Emily found herself alone in a dim, damp motel room on the edge of town, the kind of place people stayed when they didn't want to be found. The floral curtains were stained, the wallpaper peeling, and the bed creaked with every movement. But it was all she could afford with the little money she had managed to save before Ryan froze their joint accounts. She felt broken, abandoned, and lost, but she wasn't ready to give up. She couldn't. not with a child on the way, and not with the nagging feeling that Ryan's cruelty ran deeper than just betrayal. In the silence of those lonely nights, Emily began to search for answers. She still had access to their shared cloud storage, a detail Ryan had likely overlooked in his haste to erase her from his life. What she found there was the first crack in the facade. Buried among business, invoices and vacation photos were images she had never seen before, pictures of Ryan with another woman. Younger, well-dressed, always smiling at the camera like she belonged next to him. There were pictures of the two of them at fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, even a baby shower. Emily's heart sank when she saw a photo of this woman holding a tiny pair of pink baby shoes, Ryan's hand resting on her belly. It wasn't just cheating, he had another life. The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. While she had been preparing for their child's arrival, Ryan had been preparing for someone else's. The deception wasn't casual, it was calculated. Emily began cataloguing everything she found. She opened a fresh notebook and wrote down names, dates, locations. Each photo had metadata. Each file told a story. Her instincts sharpened. If he had gone this far to hide his affair, what else was he hiding? She started digging into his finances. Ryan had once bragged about how he structured his business to stay off the radar. At the time, she thought it was just harmless pride. Now she saw it differently. Using old emails and logins, she remembered, Emily accessed archived documents and transaction logs. What she discovered was far more serious than she had imagined. There were payments to fake companies, checks written out to contractors who didn't exist, money that moved quickly through multiple accounts before vanishing overseas. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a fraud. But even more chilling was the discovery of a draft document on his laptop, one he must have forgotten to delete. It was written in her name, a confession. In it, Emily admitted to falsifying business records, embezzling money, and orchestrating the entire scheme. The document was dated weeks before she was thrown out. He had planned it all. Emily sat in that motel room, holding her swollen belly, staring at the words her husband had written. Not only had he betrayed her, he had planned to ruin her, blame her, discard her, and destroy her. But he had made one mistake. He underestimated her, and she had just begun to fight back. Emily knew that if she wanted justice, she couldn't rely on emotion alone. She needed evidence, clear, undeniable proof of Ryan's crimes. The photos, the bank records, and the forged confession were a start, but they weren't enough. Not yet. She had to go deeper, to find something that couldn't be dismissed as a bitter ex-wife's revenge. So she began to build what she would later call the ledger. It started with a burner phone. She bought it with cash and used it exclusively for her investigation. She created new email accounts, secured cloud backups, and encrypted every document she uncovered. Her background in teaching helped her organize the files like a case study. Everything was labeled, categorized, and time-stamped. She wasn't just gathering information, she was creating a trail, one that would show Ryan's actions step by step. Through contacts she still had from her school days, she was able to reach out to an old friend who worked at a local bank. Carefully, discreetly, she asked questions. She learned how businesses were flagged for suspicious transactions, what laundering looked like from the inside. She applied that knowledge to Ryan's books and spotted irregularities she would have never noticed before. Dozens of invoices were duplicated with slight variations. Payments were sent to shell companies registered under random names. Some accounts funneled money through 3 or 4 different entities before disappearing entirely. She mapped out the entire structure on her motel room wall, using sticky notes and string. It looked like something out of a detective show, but it was real. All of it. Ryan had built a maze of lies, and Emily was slowly, methodically picking it apart. Then came the turning point. Emily remembered a secure USB drive Ryan had once used for important files. She found it in an old box of tools he had left behind in the garage before throwing her out. Plugging it into her laptop, she discovered folders full of confidential business documents, including contracts with forged signatures and falsified tax returns. One file contained a list of names, people Ryan had paid off or threatened to keep silent. Subcontractors, inspectors, even a former employee who had suddenly disappeared from the records. One folder stood out. It was labeled simply Plan B. Inside were surveillance photos, not of her, but of her family, her sister's house, her mother's car. There were notes about their schedules, where they worked, where they lived. It was enough to make her blood run cold. Ryan hadn't just wanted to ruin her. He wanted control, total control. And he had been preparing for resistance. Emily realized that if she confronted him alone, he might retaliate in ways she couldn't predict. She had to be smarter. She had to stay invisible. So she made a copy of every document and stored them in a safety deposit box under her maiden name. She also mailed a sealed envelope to a trusted friend with instructions to go to the police if anything happened to her. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting her unborn child, and she wasn't backing down. Emily waited. She didn't storm into a police station or confront Ryan in public. She knew better than to alert him too soon. The evidence she had could expose him, but it had to be delivered in the right way, to the right people. She spent weeks researching federal agencies, looking into who handled financial crimes and fraud at the scale Ryan was operating. Eventually, she identified a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, a woman with a reputation for handling complex white-collar cases involving shell companies and money laundering. Emily requested a meeting using a false name and explained her situation carefully, without embellishment. When they met in person, she arrived with a simple backpack filled with flash drives, printouts, and a notebook thick with handwritten notes and timelines. The agent listened silently as Emily laid out her story. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then the agent told her something that changed everything. This wasn't just a local case. It was federal. From that moment on, everything moved behind the scenes. Investigators launched a quiet probe into Ryan's finances, his business records, and his personal connections. They tapped his business phone lines, monitored his bank transactions, and pulled surveillance from traffic cameras near his warehouse and office. Ryan had no idea. On the outside, life went on as normal. He was still charming clients, still signing contracts, still spending weekends with the other woman, who was now visibly pregnant. Emily watched from the shadows. She kept her distance, never returning to the house or contacting him directly. But she stayed informed through the investigators. Every piece of information she had turned out to be accurate. The forged invoices, the offshore transfers, the shell companies. They all traced back to Ryan. He had built his empire on lies, and now the cracks were showing. Then came the day Emily had imagined over and over in her mind. Ryan was at a construction site surrounded by workers, giving instructions about a new luxury development he was building. That's when the unmarked SUVs pulled up. Federal agents stepped out, showed their badges, and placed him under arrest. His crew watched in silence as their boss was handcuffed and escorted away. The charges were listed in a quiet press release later that evening: wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. Emily sat alone in her motel room, watching it unfold on the local news. The camera footage showed Ryan being led into custody, expression blank, the life he'd built crumbling in an instant. But Emily didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. It wasn't over yet. She knew from the investigators that Ryan was going to fight back. He had lawyers, connections, and a carefully crafted image. He would try to discredit her, paint her as unstable, manipulative, and jealous. He would call her a scorned woman seeking revenge. But Emily had prepared for that too. She had kept one final secret, one final piece of evidence that no one knew about. Something that would end this. For good. The trial began 6 months later, and by then Emily had given birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Noah, a quiet, resilient child who rarely cried and often looked at her with wide, curious eyes, as if he understood more than a newborn should. She held him close every night, knowing everything she had endured was for him. But the battle wasn't over. It was only entering its final phase. Ryan's legal team went on the offensive from the very beginning. They painted Emily as emotionally unstable, a woman who couldn't accept that her marriage was over. They argued that she had fabricated evidence to get revenge, that the documents could have been forged, the photos altered. They leaned heavily on the idea that a bitter ex-wife with a motive was never a reliable source. The courtroom watched as Ryan sat calm, collected, dressed in tailored suits, shaking his head in disbelief at the accusations. The other woman was present too, now a new mother herself, clutching her baby in the back row. But what the defense didn't know was that Emily had held something back, a final piece of evidence that no one else had seen. She had never included it in her initial folder. She hadn't given it to the agents, hadn't mentioned it in interviews. It was a handwritten confession, signed by Ryan himself. Months before he had thrown her out, during a drunken night at home, he had scribbled it on a notepad after they argued. The words were a cruel taunt, never meant to be seen by anyone else. But Emily had found it in the trash and tucked it away, unsure at the time if it even mattered. Now it did. When she took the stand, she spoke plainly, without emotion. She described her life with Ryan, the shift in his behavior, the day he threw her out with no explanation. She laid out the trail of evidence she had followed and how each discovery led to another, and then calmly she produced the confession. Her lawyer submitted it into evidence, and forensic analysts verified the handwriting within hours. It matched other samples from Ryan's personal notebooks. The content was damning. He admitted to creating a fake paper trail, discussed framing. Emily even mocked how easy it would be to make her look crazy. It silenced the courtroom. From that moment on, the case shifted. The defense faltered. The jury, once unsure, began to see the truth unfold with undeniable clarity. Emily wasn't a bitter ex-wife. She was a survivor of manipulation and betrayal, a woman who had uncovered an intricate web of lies and risked everything to expose them. Ryan was found guilty on all major counts. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no chance of early release. His assets were seized, his business dismantled, his reputation destroyed. Emily walked out of that courtroom not with triumph, but with peace. She didn't need revenge. She had the truth. And in her arms she held the only thing that mattered, a new life, untouched by his lies, free to begin again.